thank you so much, Jim, for agreeing to interview with me today for the Haight Street Voice. Linda suggested that you'd be a great person to talk to. I got a couple questions that I prepared for you. So if you could talk to me about how did you get here? What brought you to Haight-Ashbury?
Well, we had lived in the Bay Area, actually in Daly City. I had grown up there, and then my father got transferred. He's in United Technology. He was rising executive for Otis Elevator. So we had to move from here to, first we moved to Philadelphia area, then to Washington, D.C. area, and then back to Philadelphia. And I was never understood. I was born in 1956. So during the Summer of Love, I was 11 years old, and my father used to always take us to see the hippies. You know, whenever people would come to town, oh, we got to go see the hippies. I had seen the hippies at 11, and I fell in love with them. I loved all the color and the excitement about it all. Then we moved back east, and I'm gay, and I wasn't understood, and I've always been a little bit of an oddball. So we moved back east, and I was harassed by all the other kids in school. They didn't understand me. They would say, "Are you a gay, hippie, communist faggot?" Well, they didn't use the word gay. "Are you a hippie, communist faggot?" And I'd go, "Yeah," and boom, boom, boom. So I was repeatedly beaten so much that by the time I was 16, I left home in June of 1972, came back to Haight-Ashbury, thinking it was going to be the beautiful neighborhood it was when I was a kid. And it wasn't. It was pretty much a boarded-up slum. But there was always a hardcore group of about 500 of the original hippies that were living here in the Haight at the time. And I was very lucky. I got adopted by the Haight-Ashbury Switchboard. The Switchboard was like the computer for the hippie movement. They had a list of every phone number and every kind of service available. And we were at the corner of, in the 70s when I got here, we were at the corner of Haight and Schrader, 1797 Haight Street. And we were a drop-in center. And people, there was 24 hours a day, somebody there manning the telephones. You could call anytime, ask, "I need a ride to get to New York City." We had a ride board. We'd try to hook you up with a rider. Say, "Oh, I need a roommate." Well, we'd put you in our roommate referral. And we did everything for free. We'd let people crash there at night. People put their sleeping bags on the floor and stay there. We had a free store in there where everything was free. We published a survival guide that taught you how to live for free in San Francisco. We had lists of every place that had free food, every place that had free shelter, legal help, you know, all kinds, anything you could want. We were the computer for the hippie movement. And we lasted till the late 1970s. It had started in 1967. I got involved in 1972, and then they adopted me. They lived in a commune at 1479 Haight, on top of a used clothing store today.
Held over?
No, the one down there,
Blue
the second
bin?
from the corner next to RBCA.
Okay, yeah,
We
Blue
were
bin
on the
vintage,
second
I think.
floor flat, and that was the Haight-Ashbury Switchboard flat. So we all volunteered, and then they taught everybody how to get on welfare. So they taught me how to get what they call today SSDA, but back then it was called ATD. We called it Aid to the Totally Divine. And yeah, we would tell people to go take LSD and see a psychiatrist and get this free government money, which paid a lot of money back then. And that's how I opened the store. I got a grant from the SSDI, which was called ATD back then. They gave me a $5,000 grant in 1976. The reason I opened the store in 1976, everything on Haight Street was boarded up in the 70s. It was like Mendel's was here, a hardware store, a couple Chinese grocery stores, and Uganda liquors, and everything else was boarded up. It was 80% boarded up. I wanted to keep the spirit of the hippies alive, and the very last of the 60 stores was called the Phoenix. It originally had been down at Haight and Masonic, and then he moved up to the old abandoned Safeway store at Haight and Schrader. In 1976, he put a sign up going out of business. I go, "Bob, you can't close this. It's all that's left of Haight-Ashbury in the 60s," because he'd opened in 1966. He was the second psychedelic store to ever open in America. And it was run by a man named Bob Stubbs, who's now deceased. So he said, "Jimmy, if you want to be the last hippie, I'm headed to Hawaii, and the last day, everything in the store is yours. You have to move it all out of here, but you'll have to find another store because they want this building for other purposes." So everything on Haight Street was boarded up. We just started calling up all these different landlords, and this is a picture of me 1409 Haight Street. The landlord said I hadn't rented that since 1968. Last time I rented it, it was the Haight Street Palace. It's been vacant for 8 years. So, bye. So he said, I'll tell you what, take the boards off the window, paint the outside of the building, and you can have it free for a year. And that's how I started the White Rabbit with 2 other partners. And we were both on that SSDA, what was ATD back then, and we each got a $5,000 grant. So I opened up a head shop in the back, Dennis had plants in the front, and Rick had fish supplies up in the top floor. Pet supplies, fish aquarium, we had fish aquariums, and we were like a hangout in the Haight. Everybody would come. The whole front of the store was about the size of this room. It was full of big plants. And then the upstairs loft was real big, and it had all the fish aquariums. And then I had a head shop in the back, and people would come and take acid and hang out all day in the store. There was nothing else to do on Haight Street, so we were like one of the only stores open. And we let people hang out. We had couches, and it was kind of a fun place. So partnership trouble, my 2 partners were insane. Because to be on SSDA, you're supposed to be mentally ill or disabled, and my partners were mentally ill, and they drove me nuts. And so I got bought out from them, and then I opened up Pipe Dreams in 1978 with Marcella Lefevre and George Walsh. And the original Pipe Dreams was at 1612 Haight in the next block. We were there in 1978 till about 81. In 81, we moved to the present location where Pipe Dreams is today. And by 1982, I was having partnership trouble with George. He had gotten divorced from his wife, and I'd been his wife's friend. And so she got screwed out of the store, and it was just George and me, and then he wasn't giving me my share of the money, so I took half all the merchandise, moved down here, and opened up Distractions, originally at 1692 Haight at Haight and Cole. And that was in May of 72. Distractions opened May 72, Pipe Dreams opened May of 78, and White Rabbit was May of 76. I was open in May, it's my birthday month. So that's the month I always started my stores. And that's how I got into business in the Haight. Never did it for the money. I did it to keep the spirit of the Haight alive. I love the Haight. I came here and was disappointed that it wasn't all bright and colorful as it was when I was a kid. So I felt I had to recreate all that. After I opened up my store, I got friends to open up a couple other stores, and before you know it, Haight Street, by the late 70s, started being a shopping street again. Well, probably the 80s, I'd say. The 70s, it was still pretty sparse. But there were some good stores here by the late 70s. And by the 80s, it started ballooning up to what it is today.
That's awesome. That answers a lot of questions that I had, like why you chose to stay.
Well, I love the neighborhood. I'm never going anywhere, even when I retire. And I'm only retiring now because I don't own the building. And the rent is $7,000 a month, and I've been losing about $10,000 a month keeping the store open for the last 6 months. So I'm 67. I'm old enough to retire, so I can go out knowing I had a 47-year run on Haight Street, which is longer than any other merchant. There are stores here longer than me, but not with the same owners. The Mendel's and hardware store have been here longer than me, but I knew it when Mendel and Sarah ran it, and then Betty ran it, and now Naomi runs it. And the hardware store, I remember when their father used to run it in the 70s, and their grandfather had started it. So, yeah, that's the same family. Both of them are the same families, but not the same person. So the person actually coming to Haight Street every day, that's me for 47 years. Still love it until people shoplift like today. And it was sad. It was little white girls with their father. How could they do that in front of their father?
Linda wanted me to be sure that I ask you about the relationship between Haight Street and Bicycle Day, because this is going to be printed in the issue that's going to be released on Bicycle Day.
All right. Well, LSD was one of the key keystones for building the Haight-Ashbury. LSD came around in the early 1960s. It was done in experiment. Well, it had been around in the 1930s from Albert Hoffman. Mm-hmm. It got introduced to the public in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, experiments at Stanford and with Timothy Leary. And then the Merry Pranksters brought it here to Haight-Ashbury. They were all living in the Haight, and the whole scene all started here. So it's a very important day in Haight-Ashbury because there's many of us that still take LSD to this day. I've been taking LSD since I was 14 years old. In fact, I ended up in a mental hospital for 3 days on LSD when I was 14 from the Orange Sunshine barrels. They were very strong, 2,500 mics. Nowadays, acid's 100 mics, 150. When I was a kid, the LSD was 1,500 to 2,500. Yeah, Orange Sunshine was 2,500 mics. too strong for a 14-year-old kid to be taking on his own by himself with nobody else around. And I learned my lesson the hard way. Spent 3 days in a straitjacket being shot up with Thorazine under fluorescent lights. That's how they cured LSD overdoses in 1971. So
A real vintage experience.
yeah, it was April 71. I was just about to turn 15 and I had that bad experience. So, but I still do LSD, not often. I see it as a sacrament. I like to personally do it out in the country. I live out in Russian River half the time. And if I do it, I'm going to do it out there. But I do it at concerts occasionally, and but always with friends, never by myself. And yes, it plays an important role because it was one of the keystones to building the Haight-Ashbury. The founding fathers of the psychedelic movement here in Haight-Ashbury were all on LSD, and it influenced the music, it influenced the clothing, the poster, the artwork, everything. The storefronts all painted up psychedelic. And so LSD was a catalyst that really changed this neighborhood. And it's important to this day. And that's why Bicycle Day is important, because many people that have the spirit of the 60s in their hearts, the LSD is right there at the keystone of all that. So it's still important. And it should be legalized for research to see if they could find some therapeutic ways to treat some mental illnesses and things, yes.
You mentioned that it was frustrating to start your day with someone shoplifting today. One of the questions I have on my list is, what issues do you feel like are impacting SF business people today? Is there something you'd like to bring attention to? That's part of why I want to do this, is to bring attention to that.
Well, the internet has really made it hard for brick and mortar stores. Unless you have a thriving website and you have a unique product, everybody shops online now, and I cannot afford the rent anymore. The rent is $7,000 a month in the store. I could afford to keep the store open if the rent was half of what it was, and it's not worth opening on weekdays. You have to sell $400 worth of stuff to pay for one employee, and I've been having $29 days, so it's not worth. So if you notice my sign on the door, I'm not open. The rest of the month I'm only going to open Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, because there's not enough foot traffic, and that's for several reasons. COVID, of course, played a major role in getting people to stay home and not go shopping, and they got used to shopping online. So that when they first opened up all the stores again about a year and a half ago, there was an initial surge. We did really good, but then once the initial surge was over, it ended. And for me, I don't have a website. I am not very technological. I don't do Facebook or website or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm just old-fashioned brick and mortar, and there's nobody walking in the stores anymore. I can't justify the rent, so I don't own the building. If I owned the building, I would keep it open on weekends and work for the rest of my life, because I love it. It's my social life. I love being in the Haight. I know everybody, like Carolyn walking in there. You know, everybody knows me. I love being here, but the foot traffic isn't good. Then we have to deal with the homeless. They're definitely a huge issue, but not as bad on Haight Street lately as it's been in the past. It's been a little bit better lately, but I hear from tourists all the time, I don't think I'll come back. There's too many homeless people. And the people that aren't from here get intimidated by it. I take it for granted because it's been here always, but people that are tourists don't get it, and they're intimidated by it. They're afraid. They think they're going to steal or rob, which isn't going to happen. They'll panhandle them, but that's it. But it intimidates people, and there is a huge homeless population on Haight Street, so that definitely adversely affects the merchants. The rents are too high. If you don't own your own building, the rents are, you can't, I don't know how anybody's making a profit on Haight Street anymore with the rents as high as they are. So high rents, internet, COVID, homelessness, shoplifting, all the main 5 things, reasons why I'm closing.
You chose the 31st of October. Is there a reason why?
Halloween, I've always been attracted to the Addams Family in my life, so I'm a little bit of a gothic, eclectic oddball, and Halloween Day is a good day for that. Plus, I figured it would be the best time because the busiest time in the store is Burning Man and Halloween. So I figure if I have everybody coming to Burning Man, will clear out half the inventory in the store anyway. Start the going out of business sale in October. Well, October is normally a busy month because of Halloween anyway, so I figure with everything half off, I'll probably clear it all out.
We talked about the White Rabbit already. Do you have a favorite thing about being a merchant on Haight Street?
The people.
Yeah?
Yeah, my friends and the camaraderie And yeah, definitely, well, it still attracts people that have the spirit of the 60s in their heart like I do. And so I love that in the summer when the tourists are here, the tourists coming are people that are coming because of its roots to the 60s. And I like that because it represented change and making America a more open-minded place and better place. And, you know, the hippies brought, you know, so much to the world. They started the environmental movement, the anti-war movement they were very big in. They, you know, played a big role in the gay rights movement, the women's rights movement, equality for all people. You know, hippies never cared what race or sex or anything you were. They were inclusive and everybody loved everybody. It was one big human family of earth people. So I love that about the hippies. And you get that type of person coming here. So I love that the Haight still attracts that.
That's awesome, and I absolutely agree. On your business card, it mentioned that you do Victorian restoration, and I learned through some research about you that you like the Addams Family because of the Victorian houses.
Yes.
So what do you think of the new Wednesday Addams show?
Oh, well, I like the show, but it isn't the same Addams Family that I grew up with. My Addams Family that I grew up with in the 60s and in the movies was a very loving family, and they might be oddballs, but they had an open heart. That, you know, I remember one episode, this beatnik motorcycle guy conks his head out in front. They bring him in and they nurse him back to health. And they're very loving and warm, open people. They just happen to be eccentric like me. The new Addams Family, they're a bit vindictive. They turn out they're killers. Morticia had murdered that guy. And that's not the Morticia I grew up with. You know, I grew up with love people. And the new Addams Family show, I don't know, it seems current for the times. It's a little bit dark and a little bit not hopeful. Like it's kind of sad in a way because Wednesday's gloomy, but not in a positive way, in a negative way, I think. I like the old Addams Family. They were much more positive. They were my role models. The new Addams Family wouldn't be my role models, but I still watch it and I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think I agree with your take. Maybe related to show business famous people, do you have a most fun or a favorite famous
so
people
many
on
famous
Haight Street
people.
story?
So many famous people. The one that was really funny, you know who John Candy was, the overweight guy on Saturday Night Live? He walked in this door right here and said, "Yes, it's me, John Candy," and then did a handstand right here. I can't even do it. Put his hands and landed on his feet like that and said, "Ta-da!" and then walked out the door. So that was one. Robert Plant was in here from Led Zeppelin, and he was shopping in here for a half hour, nobody bothering him, and he's right in this very spot right here looking at a hat, had a whole pile of stuff he was gonna buy, and a customer walks in the door. Now everybody who'd been in here for a half hour knew he was here but didn't bother him. Guy walks in the door and goes, "Holy shit, it's Robert Plant." And he dropped everything and walked out the door. I've had everybody from the Jefferson Airplane walk in here. Well, Marty Ballin, Paul Cantler used to come in. Members of the Grateful Dead have been in here. Timothy Leary's been in here. You name the rock stars, they've been in here. I used to work at the I-Beam, and I had the store, and all the bands that would play at the I-Beam back in the 80s, and these were like people like Susie and the Banshees and The Cure and New Order and Duran Duran. They would all come shopping in the store. We were originally at 1692 Haight at Cole, right by where the I-Beam was, and we were a new wave store at the time. There's one thing I haven't talked about the store. It changed as the counterculture changed and as my boyfriends changed. So it started as a hippie head shop, then became kind of a skateboard and new wave. Well, then it went to a new wave and punk rock store. Then it went to a skateboard and reggae type music store. Then back to a Grateful Dead store. Then from Grateful Dead went to a rave store. Then from rave went to Burning Man. Then from Burning Man to steampunk. So it evolved as the counterculture evolved and as my boyfriends evolved. I'd always change the store, whatever boyfriend I was in at the time. I would change the store to be like him. But getting back to famous people, so many musicians, mostly musicians, have walked in the door here. I dress many musicians, and some of them became my friends. Lucas Nelson, Willie Nelson's son, became my roommate and put my house on the cover of his album. That's the house I live in on Fulton Street, and that's Willie Nelson's son, Lucas Nelson. So I met him, and he ended up moving in with me for a bit. So we've dressed so many famous people. Les Claypool comes in to buy vest. lady who won American Idol, she was in here shopping. I'm just forgetting them all, but over the years, every genre of electronic music and electronic DJs come in here all the time. Hippie rock stars of all the 60s rock stars have walked in the door at one time or another in 47 years. All the new wave people back in the 80s when I was near the I-beams, they used to come in here.
And the I-beam was the theater that used to be where the Goodwill is, right?
Well, no. The I-beam was next to that. It was on top of all the stores. It was right the building right next to that. The theater was on the corner at Haight and Cole, and then it was an old Masonic temple, the Park Masonic Hall. And it was on top of about 5 storefronts. It was a big place that held 1,000 people. I bartended there from 1980 till 85. And I'd work all day in the store and then go bartend all night, but I saw the best music because we had all these live bands come and play live when they very first came to San Francisco. And I got to meet them all, so that was kind of fun.
Got pregnant, went on maternity leave, never went back.
Looking forward to after October, what do you hope for the future of yourself and your work?
Well, I do the Victorian restoration still, so I'm going to be focused on that. I'm going to really miss the people on Haight Street. I've already planned that on weekends I'm going to come up every day and have lunch in front of Gus's in the little parklet there so that I can see everybody, and I'll just make that a habit that every Friday, Saturday, Sunday I'll walk up here and have my lunch so I can still be seen.
That leads in excellently to another question I have for you, which is, where's your favorite place to eat lunch on Haight Street?
Oh boy, I've got a couple.
Yeah, no, like
being
absolute
here at 47
favorites.
years and eating the same food all the time, you have to have several. My 2 favorite are Hippie Thai and the Vietnamese Mace store up there.
Oh, Dragon Eats? Yeah.
Dragon
I love
Eats.
Dragon Eats.
Those are my 2 favorites.
What do you recommend at Hippie Thai?
Oh, I have all the curries. I love the Penang curry. I love the pumpkin curry. I eat everything on that menu. Pad Thai, I eat that. I go to Gus's for sandwiches all the time, too. So those are my 3 favorites. Yeah, those would be the 3 favorites. But I have to split up every now and then. I'll go to Blue Front because I like Middle Eastern. My favorite food is Thai food, Indian.
And I guess finally, what do you hope for the future of Haight Street?
Well, it's got a way to go. We've got a lot of vacant stores, and the way the foot traffic is, I don't see people rushing to rent these stores, you know. I guess the landlords are going to have to be a little bit lower on the rent. I'd be staying if my rent was half of what it was. I would open it 3 days a week, just open on weekends, and it would be enough to support the landlord, and I'd make a little profit, but I cannot afford it, the $7,000 a month I'm paying anymore. So it's over.
Definitely. And one thing I want to ask, you've said this several times, if there was a way people could practice having the spirit of the 60s in their heart, how would you recommend they try?
Well, volunteer. Like I volunteered at the Switchboard all the time. Be kind and nice to everybody. Leave the world a better place. Like I live my heart by a philosophy. I'm not a religious person, but I have a spirituality, and I thank the spirit of goodness every day for all the blessings of my life. I never ask for anything because I'm already blessed. But my whole philosophy in life is try to make the world a better place. Win-win, whatever you do, you want to benefit yourself, but you want to benefit others around you by what your actions are. And treat nature with respect, treat the earth with respect, treat people with respect, and the world will be a better place. And that's the heart of the hippie movement. They respected the earth, they respected people, and were inclusive. And so be inclusive, be respectful, be giving, and smile.
Thank you so much, Jim. Last but not least, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience?
Well, it's been a pleasure being a merchant here on Haight Street for 47 years. I'm certainly going to miss y'all. You'll have to come by Gus's Parklet and look for me on the weekends, and I'll be having a sandwich out there. So I'd love to see everybody still. You're all in my heart.
Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate this interview.
All right, thank you.